What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Gifted Gamer 204 back at it again. And yes, you guessed right. Today, we got another banger for y'all, man. So if you're new to the channel, please don't hesitate to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that share button as we keep on rolling right into today's video. Now, check this out. Today, we got a good one. So, we're going to be taking a look at the interview. This is over at Eurogamer. Okay, so they're doing their whole big PlayStation 30th anniversary. They've been covering it for like the past week or so. Okay, so this is their interview with the one and only Shawn Layden. Okay, so we're gonna be taking a look at this. This is a pretty lengthy video interview. So just sit back and relax as Shawn Layden is gonna take us through what it was like, you know, the beginning stages of the PlayStation and how it just came about. Okay, so this is especially if you interested in PlayStation, this is a very important interview because it takes you back at to the time where this was actually being discussed and how everything came about. Okay, but it's a pretty lengthy one, so if you need to go grab a drink or something, go ahead and do that because we're gonna be here for a little while. Okay, so I'm gonna try to get through it as quickly as possible. So without further ado, here we go. Okay, so it says here, this is gonna be good, by the way. Eurogamer's week-long coverage of PlayStation's 30th anniversary begins today with a very special interview, an extended conversation looking back behind the scenes at PlayStation's original launch, how the brand became a breakout success despite established competition, its Icarus moment in the PS3 era, and then its ongoing battle for industry dominance. Few saw more of PlayStation last 30 years than Shawn Layden, who was already at Sony when the company's console ambitions were first forming. Over more than 3 decades, Layden became a pivotal figure within its gaming division and ultimately served as Sony's chairman of PlayStation Worldwide Studios. Layden began his tenure tasked with bringing countless games to PlayStation and ended it by overseeing the launches of PlayStation's biggest blockbusters from its own development powerhouses. Now, 5 years on from his 2019 departure, after an astonishing 32 years of service, it was high time for a catch up and look back at everything PlayStation had achieved and how it all began on a huge gamble. Okay, so here we go. This is the interview here. So they asked, what was your first memory of PlayStation? You were already working at Sony at the time. What was your reaction to it? Was the idea of a games console taken seriously? When PlayStation launched, I was still with corporate, back at Sony headquarters, where I'd been since 1987. I was attached to the office of the chairman, Akio Morita, the founder of Sony. I was his assistant, speechwriter, ghostwriter, interlocutor when I had to be. And we were watching all that from afar, so to speak. But I remember having a presentation, early on where they brought the PlayStation prototype to the chairman's office and we got to see what they were building. I remember back in mid 94 before the launch, standing up in a boardroom playing Ridge Racer and going, oh my God, this is going to be effing amazing. But within Sony, I think a lot of the leadership at the time didn't take it seriously. They thought, oh my God, Sega and Nintendo own this thing, being the console industry. You think Sony's going to come in sideways and try to divide the thing up into a three-piece pie? It was a fool's errand. I think some of them might have even called it at the time. But then Sony president Norio Ogasan was a believer. A lot of people thought we were taking a risk. It was a fight to get the Sony name onto the machine. They didn't want to be associated with it. So that was a problem right there. We almost didn't have the name Sony on the PlayStation. So you moved over to PlayStation division specifically pretty soon after. How did that happen? I joined PlayStation specifically in 96 when they were a year into it. They'd already launched in North America and in Japan. Sadly, the chairman had suffered a stroke, so that position was no longer required. And the president of PlayStation at the time was a guy named Terry Tokunaka. We'd worked together on the acquisition of Columbia Pictures, so I was kind of a known quantity. After the chairman's death, Terry asked me, "What are you going to do now? Why don't you come join us in this new company, Sony Computer Entertainment?" I said, "Okay, that's great. What would I do there?" He said, "You'd be a video game producer." And I said, "I'll be honest with you. I don't know anything about making video games." And Terry was very upfront. He said, "It's all right. None of us do either. This is the perfect time to get in. We all make this stuff up as we go along together." That's crazy. What was it actually working inside PlayStation back then? Talk about baptism by fire. I was walking around trying to get to know people in my first week, and my boss comes up and says, "Hey, are you going to E3? Because that's next week." I said, "Do you want me to go to E3? He said, "Yes, I should go." I said, "Great." I say before finding a colleague, what the hell is E3? I didn't have business cards, and I landed in LA in 96 going to E3 after only being in the company for 10 days. If you want total immersion in the game business as a neophyte, get dropped into E3 on day 10. You either catch on real quick or you get rolled over by the Leviathan. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that word wrong. You just have to run faster than the slowest bear, as they say. So PlayStation faced established competition. Nintendo, Sega were already giants of the console world. How did Sony decide to it was going to take them on? Okay, obviously we were going to build, or rather we built, an optical drive peripheral for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Nintendo realized cartridges had already maxed out their memory footprints, and so we, or rather Ken Kutaragi, created a compact disc technology to support the SNES, and we were just about ready. I think it was at CES in 93. We were going to announce the partnership, and Nintendo left us standing at the altar after they did a pivot at the last minute and went with Philips. So there was Ken, proverbially standing at the altar with his optical disc drive in his hands. An indictment, he went back to the leadership at Sony and at the time and said, "All I need is an OS and some more connecting tissue for this thing, and we can build our own game machine." We moved out of Sony headquarters to a place in Aoyama, which is about 20 miles away, but more in the entertainment district of Tokyo, because they felt it was important to the DNA of the company, and that was probably the best decision the company made. So remember, we did a video on this when this actually went down. We read about it. You know, Nintendo leaving them high and dry and going with Philips. That's crazy, bro. Let's keep going. So, best decision the company made. How so? When they decided they were getting into the game business, this is when it gets good, by the way, okay? Here we go. When they decided they were getting into the game business, they knew they had the technology, the engineers, but they said, let's be honest, we sell electronics. Sony knew that without entertainment DNA, we would not be successful. So the initial stage was made a joint venture between Sony Electronics and Sony Music. Half the company was from Sony Music side, and well, you could see it on the shop floor at 8 a.m. All the hardware engineers were at their desks wearing their Sony vests, working on the engineering thing. And then around 10 through 11 a.m., all the Sony Music guys will come in, hungover, sunglasses, cigarettes hanging out of their mouths. They look at the Nikkei paper for 45 minutes, drink a cup of tea, and then go, all right, lunch. They'd all stand up and they'd all leave. These people weren't even working. When they got to the office, all they did was pick up the paper, read it for 45 minutes, drank some tea, and then go off to go have lunch. That's crazy. But this is when it gets good. So we wouldn't see them again for the rest of the day. They will leave and leave for the rest of the day because Sony Music populated sales, marketing, advertising, publisher relations. So those were guys who would go out with the people at Square and ply them with whiskey until the wee hours of the morning to finally get the Final Fantasy VII off of Nintendo and on to PlayStation. That was very key right there. So this is what they were doing. This is why they would come in all hungover into the office and things of that nature. They were busy putting in that work with the people at Square trying to get Final Fantasy off of Nintendo and bring it onto the PlayStation platform. Very smart. When that announcement was made, that was really the oh my god moment. Sony's really serious about this now. And that's down to the music guys. The darkness of just trying to get a deal over the line. They were amazing. That's what set it off right there. They brought the legendary Final Fantasy VII onto PlayStation. It's crazy. Let's keep going. What other big decisions were made early on that helped PlayStation a foothold? Okay, so here we go. We had the optical technology, and games were all on flash ROM at the time. So that was a huge leap. ROM carts were $8 to $10 a pop to get blanks. And then you had to get them flashed, usually in Taiwan or in Hong Kong, which meant lead times of 6-8 weeks to get stock refilled. Optical discs were $1 a throw, and you didn't have a minimum amount. You could just pop 10,000 out and throw them in the marketplace. If it catches fire, call me on Thursday. I can refill you by Tuesday. The momentum really changed the business model of that. Sony deliberately never had more than maybe 22% of first-party software share. On the Sega platforms and Nintendo, first party had 80, 85, 90% of software market. But we always knew PlayStation would only be successful if we made it, quote, the people's platform. Okay? It's for third parties to come make a business. We'll come in, we'll get, 25% typically at launch, but the share is higher because we put all the bets on the new games. But over time, the real leaders in that marketplace as far as revenue and share goes were the Activisions and the Take-Twos and the EAs. Look how this is what I be real quick. When I be saying how Microsoft bought their success, look how far back these companies go. Okay? Activision was well been established from way back then. But that's another story for another day. Let's keep going. Our first party responsibility was to grow the pie overall. And as the pie gets bigger, everyone's slice gets bigger. So everyone's happy. Growing the market overall meant creating new type of games, new genres of games, and not competing in some of the standard genre categories. And so you got games like Parappa the Rapper, you got games like SingStar, Ico, and Shadow of the Colossus. Who's going to make those games? It was a first-party imperative to show, firstly, the power of the platform, and then secondly, the endless categories that we could build a games into. We weren't just trapped into 3 genres and try to fight for market share from each other. So I think those are important decisions taken early on. I think the founders of PlayStation had a really, really keen view on what it took to be successful and how to differentiate it in the marketplace. And a lot of those decisions were taken super early. Very important. Aside from the hardware and games, PlayStation has some memorable marketing too. Absolutely. If you look at Japanese TV advertising, it was like nothing you'd ever seen in gaming. Gaming advertising has been really straightforward. Here's the character, here's the action scene, but the advertisement team at PlayStation came from Sony Music. So we were making games like you market rocket bands with a little of the mystery, a little of the sexy. It was the same in England too. And this is the UK Wipeout advertisement. I remember when this thing came out. It's crazy. Just look at that advertisement. It's crazy. So yeah, Wipeout here had a memorable advert that caused some controversy back in the day. And then there were suggestions that the E in the game's name was a nod to drugs culture. Layden laughs. I think these urban legends are cool, and people are extract meaning where there wasn't necessarily one. I think the innovations of Wipeout were us teaming up with the creatives like Designers Republic, who were at the top of their game. The Wipeout packaging was like nothing anyone had ever seen before, except on like a EDM album cover. Exactly. And then the music I thought was genius too. I was in Japan when Wipeout released, so I had to bring it to Japan to and localize it for the Japanese market. But it helped that Japan hadn't heard of the Chemical Brothers or Crystal Method or Prodigy. Wipeout was like a music introduction vehicle. That's crazy. And in London, I would come over business to go to Sony Liverpool and see the guys up there. And we'd be going to clubs during at that time and see PlayStation 1 kiosks with Wipeout in nightclubs. You've got your vodka Red Bull in one hand and you're playing Wipeout with the other. It was the beginnings of making gaming into a lifestyle. The beginnings of making it something where gaming is more than just a distraction. All of a sudden, gaming became less something whispered about in pubs and more you overhearing someone saying, "Oh, I'm playing Tomb Raider. Oh, Tomb Raider? Oh, do you play games? That's cool." So that's big right there. They took their whole marketing thing, being that they're in the music industry, you know, and electronics. They just brought all that marketing power to the PlayStation, and that's how they were able to, get this thing out there. And like he said, when he brought it over to Japan with Wipeout, they've never heard music like that. So Shawn Layden brought that over. So now the Japanese are seeing the game as well as listening to the music, the soundtrack, and they're vibing like, yo, like, what is this? It's brand new to them. It's nothing like they've seen before. Remember, they were used to traditional Nintendo games and Sega games, just the traditional game. PlayStation brought something new, as you see here, with that whole Wipeout thing. It mixed the music with the game. It was crazy. It's something that we've never seen before. Let's keep going though. Let's keep going. Um, Here we are. I think for a lot of folks, coming home from the pub or unibar and playing Wipeout was a bit of a ritual. Even playing it at the point was difficult. Let's be honest, the original Wipeout is rock hard. It's unforgiving, and honestly, we do that too. Come home from the pub and play. You can't play it, but you laugh your ass off. Everyone can take the first corner. With the sequel, we did make it the handling a bit more forgiving. Specifically for people back from the pub, not specifically, but it was definitely a benefit to them. And for people like me who could barely get into the original Wipeout without throwing my controls at the screen. So, what was it like being part of those early conversations around what consoles to do? You were on the board when Sony came up with the cell processor, the emotion engine. These magical terms now seem to have gone away. What's changed? Now pay attention. This is when it starts to get real good, okay? So he said, from a development perspective, things like the emotion engine at the heart of the PlayStation 2 and the cell processor at the heart of the PS3 were the biggest headaches of the day. Trying to learn to build for those Proprietary architectures require you learn a new skills to get the most out of them. Naughty Dog always found a way to get under the hood of the tech before anybody else. Of course, they had early access, but they borrowed deep. Being platform exclusive allowed you to push the limits of the platform's capabilities, and you didn't have to make compromises, which you do when you do a multi-platform product. It's like, don't push too hard on the frame rate because this other platform can't handle that. This is very, very important. He's letting you know right there how it is to make a video game, what these game developers have to go through when they're making a video game, especially from these third parties. That's why you see so much bugs coming in today's gaming. That's why there's so many bugs, unfinished games. You get that you have to be getting patches almost all the time, a new patch. It's because of this. But it's more work because they have to learn each console. So this is taking you back. Now, just real quick, one game in mind, right, is Wukong, Black Man Wukong. Now, you take a look at Game Science. They had to learn the PlayStation. They have to learn the Xbox Series X, and they have to learn the Xbox Series S. Because when you're making a game for Xbox, it's mandatory. You have to make it so that both systems can play the game. You know how much work that would have been for Game Science trying to get this game launched day one on the Xbox with all that Shawn Layden just told us right here? That's a lot of work. So they decided, we're just going to stick to the PlayStation. We're not trying to deal with no two Xboxes over there. We'll deal with PlayStation and PC, and that's it. We'll release it there. But just think about it. And now you go to the first party, which is the bread and butter, which is why we buy your specific console, right? This is what he's talking about here. Naughty Dog had first dibs. They were able to get in the internals of the PlayStation and figure it out. They had access to everything, so they can master it. You take a look at all Sony first parties. That's why they're so great. You see what I'm saying? This is why they are so great, because they take the time to study their own platform. They figure out how much they can push the game to get it to be at the highest levels possible. Now you take a look at Xbox. Do you see any of those developers doing things like this? I don't think so. And that's why you get all those damn 30 frames per second games, because they don't want to take the time to do all that. They're lazy. They have a Game Pass budget. They now trying to go through all that. You see what I'm saying? This is telling you everything right here in this paragraph when it comes to these game developers. But let's keep going. Rather than make two versions of the same game, where one looks remarkably better. Oh, here, this is another. We could highlight this whole thing right here. So, rather than make two versions of the same game where one looks remarkably better than the other, you just sort of balance everything out so it all looks the same. It's why the PlayStation homegrown stuff looks better on PlayStation than anything else, because that's all they do. Exactly. That's all the tech they need to know about. And I think that gave special advantages on PS2 and PS3, which took other people a long time to catch up. But that wasn't necessarily a good thing. It was a bit of a headache, and there was a huge cost involved. PS3 hardware took a long time to get profitability, a long time, whereas when we launched the PS4, it was pretty much a non-loss product from day one. So this is why the PS3 has, till this day, has been the one system that's, that was like their low point. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, because it's known it was hard to develop games for the PS3 with that specific engine they had in there, right? So, but they finally reached that level of profitability. As to when the PS4, as soon as they launched, they already knew they were gonna make their profits back. Okay. Um, and also, why am I forgetting his name right now? Um, it'll come to me. I'm forgetting his name right now. Mark Cerny. Sorry, I don't know how I forgot his name. Mark Cerny spoke on this and saying how difficult it was to develop game for the PlayStation 3. He spoke on this. Let's keep going. I remember being at Sony's Tokyo headquarters for the PS4 launch, and the console's near immediate profitability clearly being a big deal. Yeah, and that comes down to us moving more commoditized silicon. I know I'm not pronouncing that word right. I think there was a vision at one time where the PS3 cell processor will somehow go off platform and compete in the world of CPUs with the likes of Intel and Nvidia and AMD and others. But that didn't happen. And without that happening, all of the economies of scale that you might have predicted for the technology were impacted negatively because you couldn't build enough of them fast enough. This is getting good. So what was it like at Sony during the PS3 era? Of all the generations, I think it's the one that stands out as having the biggest struggle to get right. So PS3 was Sony's Icarus moment. We had PS1, PS2, and now we're building a supercomputer. And we're going to put Linux on it. And we're going to do all these sorts of things. We flew too close to the sun. And we were lucky and happy to have survived the experience. But it taught us a lot. And going to PS4, we learned things like buy it, don't build it if you can. You can manage costs better. You can argue with vendors, get better deals instead of building your own thing. We also learned that the center of the machine has to be gaming. This is key right here. Listen, it's not about whether I can stream movies or play music. Can I order a pizza while I'm watching TV and play? No. Just make it a game machine. Just make it the best game machine of all time. I think that's what really made the difference. When PS4 came out, it set us against what Xbox was trying to do. They wanted to build more of a multimedia experience, and we just wanted to build a kick-ass game machine. This is key right here. This is what I'm talking about. You see, they learned from their mistake with the PS3. And they took that mistake and now build on it on the PS4, and look at what we got. While Xbox tried to emulate what Nintendo was doing with the Wii in the whole entertainment system. Remember, I spoke on that on my video. And that's when that was their struggle. The Xbox One. But the only thing here is that Xbox wasn't ever, they could have never recovered. They never recovered from it. Because they didn't have people like this in place, like Shawn Layden, like Mark Cerny. They didn't have all these people in place. They just wanted to do marketing. That's what Xbox, that's another story for another day. We got to get into this, okay? Let's keep going. So, which led to Shuhei Yoshida's legendary, here's how you share games on PS4 video. We all remember this right here, right? He says that was created on the fly, in the moment, when announcements were made by other people, and we said, what's our answer to the sharing question? And in the moment of inspiration, they came up with that. And it was a devastating in its simplicity. Okay, so we all know this commercial here. This one, he passes him like, oh, you want to know how we share games? And he passes him the Killzone copy. He's like, here you go. And that's how, old fashioned. Crazy. So he keeps going with the PS3. Y'all gotta pay attention to this part. PS3 got us back to first principles. And that's what you need sometimes. When you're riding too high on your own supply, you take a little tumble, you hit your head on the wall, and you realize, I can't continue to operate this way. PS3 was the clarion call to everybody to get back to our first principle. Over time, we had the PS3 fat, the PS3 not so fat, then the really tiny one. And that was all just in the pursuit of it's a game machine, making sure it's a game machine. That's all we did here. And by that time, the learning curve on the cell processor was solved, so a lot of developers were able to come out with stuff. The first couple of years, though, it was pretty grim. We learned a lot and we were able to put into practice. Learning is one thing, but then based on that learning, the question is, can you execute a different approach? Sony had the ability and the capability to take a deep look inside and go, we've got to stop doing these things over there. We've had to start doing things like we used to. Exactly. This is the point. You need to be able to look at the mistake, get away from the mistake, make a new plan, but at the same time of making the new plan, can you actually execute that plan? And this is why you put certain people in place. When we're talking about engineers and CEOs and CFOs and all these things, this is why you put certain people with these titles, because they need to be able to make decisions like this. These are people that Microsoft does not have. It's a totally different ballgame when you cross over to the Microsoft world. You can see it. You know, with all the people that are working in PlayStation or used to work in PlayStation, such as Shawn, right? As he speaks to you, look at everything that he's telling us. From the moment they presented the PS1, and now he's diving into the PS4. Look at how he speaks about things. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Like he's very knowledgeable. When you go listen to the people that are in these same positions over at Microsoft, they sound like they don't know what the hell they talking about. I mean, these people, all they know what to say is Game Pass, and we want more. We want to grow. We feel like Game Pass. This is all they say. That's all that comes out these people's mouths. It's absolutely ridiculous. Let's keep going. This is talking about his favorite games. I'm not gonna get into all that, right? So let's get into this one. Were you ever jealous of a game on a rival platform? The one time I felt jealous, I'm going back to my time in Tokyo on PS1. My job was to bring Western titles to Japan. Pay attention. And in your local parlance, that's like bringing coals to Newcastle, right? I will bring things like Twisted Metal to Japan, and the Japanese market will go, what the hell is this? But one game I saw early on, and I heard the buzz, and I went out to Core Design in Derby because I wanted to get Tomb Raider for the Japanese market. I wanted it to be on PlayStation. And I saw the Smith brothers, and we talked about it. And they were really excited about the concept. We talked it through. They talked it through. Bada bing, bada boom. They signed to bring it out on Sega Saturn. And he says Sega. And then shortly thereafter, they did get it onto the PlayStation in Japan as well. But it launched on Sega. And yeah, that always felt, what could I have done to actually have gotten it? But I came that close. That's huge. Because picture that. Tomb Raider would have actually been a PlayStation game. Think about it. Who knows? It could have been they could have been exclusive to them till this day. But who knows? But it's just crazy. Remember I told you when I did the IGN top 100, and I told you, that I played Tomb Raider, it was on my Sega Saturn. Because I had both. I had a Sega Saturn and a PlayStation. I had both of them. As well as the Nintendo 64. So that's why I didn't want it on the list. Because due to the fact that I had played it on Sega Saturn. So I'm like, why is it here? But this is why. It's crazy that he's actually speaking on this. Because I actually just mentioned this in that IGN video. Which is crazy. But yeah, that makes you wonder. Like, things happen for a reason, though. Because think about it. They would have gotten Tomb Raider. Who knows? We probably would have never gotten Uncharted. You see how that works? It's crazy if you really think about it. If that deal would have gone through and Sony was to acquire, Tomb Raider, being how great Tomb Raider was, they probably would have built on that and continue on with Tomb Raider. But then we might have probably never even gotten Uncharted. It's crazy to think about. It's really crazy. Oh, man. This is crazy, man. How everything just unfolds is crazy. And this is the last part. He talks about this game he wants to go back to. It's called Mad Eye Evil. They actually did a remaster to this game. For the PS4. So it's called Mad Eye Evil. I highlighted it if y'all want to go and take a look at it. But yeah, this is the first half of this interview. Yeah, join us tomorrow for the second half of our exclusive interview. Hopefully they dropped it by now, so we can go take a look at the second one. But that'll be in a separate video. But anyways, to wrap this up, man, this interview is absolutely amazing. What he's speaking about on this interview, he's dropping a lot of gems for us. He's letting us know how everything started and how PlayStation, dropped the ball with the PS3, but was able to recover from that. Just like Nintendo did with the Wii U. They somehow dropped the ball with the Wii U, but just turned around and recovered from that and gave us the Nintendo Switch. I hope Nintendo does something like this so now we can go and see the Nintendo side of it, how they were brought up, and hopefully they give us their version of what happened, with the whole them switching over to Philips instead of using Sony, just to see both sides of the story, just to see what they have to say. And we would love to see how, everything came about and how they're still moving forward and being so successful. Talk about the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color and all these things. Nintendo's classic. Come on. Nintendo's classic. We all grew up on Nintendo. But yeah, this interview, I can't wait to see the second part. I hope they drop it soon so I could go and take a look at that. But we're gonna leave this video right here. Y'all make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, share the video. I'm gonna be doing a part 2 once they drop the second half of this interview, because this interview is real important that we go through it, especially if you're a PlayStation fan. This is history. You get to know how everything came about and how everything is moving right now. And in the second half of the interview, I believe they start asking him about the future of PlayStation and where he sees it going for in the next 6 years or so. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's your boy, the Gifted One here, man. And I'm going to catch y'all on the next one. I'm gone.